Welcome back to Only Talk Sports. We talk sports every single day, or at least we try to. I'm your host, Jeffrey. Subscribe to the channel if you like sports content. Hit that notification bell so you never miss another video. On Friday night, there is a game between two struggling Big Ten programs in the Nebraska Cornhuskers and the Rutgers Scarlet Knights. Who's going to win this game, in my opinion? Let's break it down. Now, Nebraska to start the season is 2-3. And they had a disastrous first result against Northwestern in Dublin, Ireland, and they lost that game 31-28. They probably should have won, but they couldn't get it done. Then they came back home and beat North Dakota 38-17. That was a decent win there. But then they lost to Georgia Southern 45-42 in a game that got Scott Frost fired, and now Mickey Joseph, the interim coach now, he is their coach right now until they get a new one, or maybe they'll promote him. Probably they're going to get a new coach, and he's doing decent to start his tenure here at Nebraska. And they lost to Oklahoma 49-14 in a game they weren't close in, but then they bounced back and beat Indiana 35-21 in a game where they played pretty well on both sides of the ball. Quarterback Casey Thompson, again the transfer from Texas, he played well against Indiana, and he had 270 yards, 2 touchdowns, an interception, and he had a rushing touchdown. So he's playing solid. He can run, he can throw. He's a better thrower than a runner, but he doesn't like to use his legs too often to avoid injury. But his passing game is really good. Running back Anthony Grant was a beast against Indiana. He had 136 yards and like 32 carries. He played fantastic. Wide receiver Trey Palmer had 157 yards and a touchdown. He's a fantastic receiver, transfer from LSU. He's probably going to be an NFL talent receiver. And wide receiver Oliver Martin had 65 yards and a touchdown against Indiana. And on the defensive side of the ball, defensive lineman Ty Robinson had 4 tackles. Linebacker Garrett Nelson had 3 tackles. Defensive back Marcus Buford Jr. had 3 tackles. Defensive back Quentin Newsom had 2 tackles. And linebacker Luke Reamer had 2 tackles and an interception. Nebraska's got a lot of talent. As I've said in previous videos talking about Nebraska, they have a lot of talent, and they should be better than the record that they are because they've got good players on offense and good players on defense, a lot of them from the transfer portal and some returning from last season. So it's going to be very interesting to see if they can take that talent and win at Rutgers. Rutgers to start the season with Greg Schiano at head coach is 3-2. And they won at Boston College in their first game of the season, 22-21, in a game that coming in, a lot of people thought Boston College was going to be better than they are, but they did get the win, and that was a good win. Then they beat Wagner 66-7 at home. Good win there because Wagner's not very good. Then they won at Temple in another game that they scraped by 16-14. But then the last 2 weeks, they've had 2 losses, 27-10 to Iowa, and then they lost 49-10 at Ohio State. It's very hard to beat Ohio State. You have to be very talented to do that, and Rutgers just does not have enough talent to beat the Buckeyes, especially in the horseshoe. So in that game against Ohio State, quarterback Noah Vedral, he's a game-time decision against Nebraska, and he did play a couple snaps against Ohio State. He only had 10 rushing yards. They did not have him throw the ball, but he's got an upper body injury. Probably something that's preventing him to throw the ball well, or they would have had him do it. But he might play against Nebraska, but if he don't play, quarterback Evan Simon, he had 74 yards, a touchdown, and interception against Ohio State, so he played well in his relief, especially on the ground as well. He had some rushing yards, so it's very hard to throw against Ohio State, so having a backup throw for 74 yards and a touchdown, at least it was something, especially considering against Iowa, he only threw for 49 yards, so he did play better. So he's playing better than what a lot of people think, so maybe he can fill in for Noah Vedral if he can't play. Running back Samuel Brown had 79 yards. Samuel Brown, the 5th, is a good back. They've had good backs in the past like Isaiah Pacheco, so Samuel Brown's kind of falling in that lead. So that's good for Rutgers because you want to have good running game against the Big Ten opponents. Wide receiver Sean Ryan had 40 yards and a touchdown, so he's a decent receiver. Johnny Langan is a do-it-all player for Rutgers. He's kind of a guy, they used to have him at quarterback, but now they kind of have him as a tight end. And they sometimes use him to run the ball and a receiver. He had 23 receiving yards against Ohio State and 3 rushing yards. It's hard to run against Ohio State. And on the defensive side of the ball, linebacker Deion Jennings had 6 tackles, defensive back Avery Young had 6 tackles and an interception, and defensive back Christian Braswell had 6 tackles against Ohio State. So obviously Ohio State's throwing a lot of passes in that game, and Rutgers got a lot of tackles. So who do I think is going to win this game? This game is at Rutgers. And usually when I do not know between the talent on 2 teams, it's kind of tough to tell who's better. I usually pick the home team. But in this game, there are variables here that kind of lean Nebraska. And I'll say why. Because you have Rutgers coming off a game where they got beat down against Ohio State, and Nebraska just got a good win over Indiana. They have probably more confidence than Rutgers does. Now, again, this is a home game for Rutgers, and Rutgers has talent. If Noah Vedral plays, that will help Rutgers even more, even though Evan Simon has played well. But Nebraska does have the better offense than Rutgers does, especially with Casey Thompson and Trey Palmer. And Nebraska's defense is starting to play better now that Mickey Joseph has kind of settled his team down. I think Nebraska's going to win 31-24 over Rutgers. I think Rutgers can win. Again, the home field advantage is good, but I don't think Rutgers has just enough talent. I think Nebraska is more talent. Now that Nebraska finally got a win, I think Nebraska is going to carry it over and beat Rutgers 31-24. Subscribe to the channel if you like sports content. Like this video down below. Comment down below what you think about this Nebraska Rutgers game and who you think is going to win and why. And I will see you next time.